Kim Miller is the Schools and Partnership Coordinator at the Blue Dragon Children's Foundation in Vietnam. Blue Dragon's work involves rescuing victims of human trafficking in Southeast Asia, providing legal, psychological, education, and livelihood support for survivors while undertaking initiatives to keep vulnerable communities and people safe from modern slavery. Kim has a background in education and social work and is a passionate advocate for equality and social justice. Her role at Blue Dragon combines her skills, knowledge, and experience to support and inspire people around the world to understand and take action on issues that impact disadvantaged young people in Vietnam. Those include poverty, modern slavery, and human trafficking. In July 2024, Kim will be swimming the English Channel to end human trafficking. She'll be raising money and awareness for Blue Dragon's anti-trafficking initiatives. Welcome, Kim. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. I have to say, we have Rotary. I'm just to, I guess, give a little bit of context. So I work for Blue Dragon Children's Foundation in Vietnam. I've worked for them with them since 2014, and I was a passionate supporter for years before that. But I'm currently living in Sydney, Australia, so I'm coming to you at about 11:30 at night. So I hope I'm still coherent by the end of this. I'm just going to try to share my screen and make sure that I can pop up some photos for you. Select the window. Screen, here we go. Share. That's not the window I want though. Okay, got it. Okay. Yeah, so hi, so Blue Dragon Children's Foundation. So we are, as you heard, an organization, an Australian organization, a charity working out of Vietnam. And we started working, it's actually our 20th year anniversary, our 20th year birthday this year. So we've been working in Vietnam for 20 years now. And when we first started, we were a charity that worked with street kids, that worked with children living in poverty on the streets. And we didn't ever really intend to become an organization that worked in anti-trafficking, but it's kind of evolved over the years because that's where the need is. And I have to say, you know, we have Rotary clubs in Australia, but I don't know of any that are dedicated to issues such as human trafficking like you guys are. And it really is so inspiring to me to know that there are groups of, 22 of you on this call today who are passionate about ending human trafficking and understanding it and creating change. So it's something that's very dear to my heart, and I've seen the impact when it's not front and center for people. And so, yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and speaking with you tonight, but also that this is something that you're doing on an ongoing basis. So I mentioned that Blue Dragon's been operating now for 20 years. We have been thinking for the last couple of years about what would it take to end human trafficking in Vietnam. And I know that probably sounds like a really lofty statement, a big, hairy, audacious goal, but we have some reasons to believe it's actually possible. And I hope that by the end of tonight or this morning for you guys, you will also believe that it's possible. When we first started doing rescues of victims of human trafficking, we were primarily rescuing children who'd been trafficked from the centre of Vietnam, from Hue, into home-based garment factories down in Ho Chi Minh City. And these were children whose families had been tricked. Their families were told that the children would be getting an education, they would be going to the city, they'd be on a scholarship to be able to go to school. They might work for 1 or 2 hours a day, where they could learn a trade and earn a little bit of money to send back to their families. But the reality was that they were working 16 to 18 hours a day as slaves. They were sleeping on the floors in between the sewing machines, being fed basic 2-minute noodles, instant noodles or rice. No freedom, no education, no contact with their families, and definitely no pay. And when we first started doing these rescues, there was kind of an understanding in Vietnam that children worked to help their families, but there wasn't necessarily the understanding that children were being tricked and that their families were being tricked and that they were being forced to work as slaves. And so we started taking the police and the government with us when we were rescuing children so that they could see for themselves the slavery conditions that these children were working under, and to go back to the communities to talk to the families to understand that the children had been tricked. As a result of that work, we started to see changes to the child labour laws in Vietnam. So the factories that were found to have children working as slaves, or the children who had been trafficked, were slapped with big fines and they lost their licence. And we went from doing about 40 rescues a year of children in these sort of situations to not doing any rescues at all in the years, just a few years prior to COVID. In addition to taking police and government officials with us to doing the rescues and getting those child labour laws changed, we also opened a drop-in centre for the children in central Vietnam. We started working with families to help families have sustainable livelihoods, building homes for them, because many of their homes were built on the beaches where they were very susceptible to being washed away as soon as the storms or the floods came. And so started building the community. And we found that that really helped to be able to keep children safe. What we hadn't been able to put an end to at that time, though, was the trafficking of young girls into forced marriages and into the sex trade. And prior to COVID, that was making up about 80% of our work. Most of our work by that stage was rescuing girls who had been trafficked into forced marriages and the sex trade. What we found, though, through COVID is that the situation changed very much. The economic downturn, the vulnerability that people were facing meant that there were more and more people becoming vulnerable in a number of different ways. Back in from about 2011, one of the big dangers that children faced in Hanoi and in Vietnam was that of sexual predators. And there weren't any laws that actually protected boys against sexual abuse. Girls were protected and boys weren't protected in that same way. And we were working with a group of children who were being abused. And it took until 2016 to have that law changed. It was changed in 2016 and ratified in 2018. And so we were able to end that sexual abuse of boys just through the protection of them through the law. Back then, we used to say that we had about 48 hours from the moment a child was homeless in Hanoi, in the city, until if we hadn't met them, something worse than being homeless would have happened to them. But if we hadn't met them in about 48 hours, by the time we met them, the majority of them had a story of abuse or of being approached by pedophiles or gangs, or having their belongings stolen, or having been beaten up or abused. Through COVID, that changed, and we no longer have that 48-hour window of time. When young people are coming from the countryside into the cities to look for work, to be able to help their families, the minute they step off the bus, they were vulnerable. From the moment they were arriving in the cities, they were being offered positions where they might be taken to construction sites such as this, where they were forced to live on site for no pay. They'd have any identification papers stolen from them, and they were trapped in slavery in these conditions. And that was something that we saw really increase in the uptake post-COVID. In addition to that, we found that there were thousands of girls from Vietnam who had been trapped in Myanmar in brothels and illegal casinos. And one of the things that happened through COVID was that as part of their anti-COVID measures, China actually built a fence. And so it stopped a lot of migration, a lot of the informal migration that was happening between the countries. And so Chinese people who may have been using those casinos and brothels on the border of Myanmar, up near the Golden Triangle area, the very lawless area, were no longer able to do so. And so these women who had been trafficked and used as slaves in these brothels became even more vulnerable, because they were no longer able to, make the money that they had been making for the people who had trafficked them. And so we started doing rescues of girls out of Myanmar. And, I don't know how much you know about the violence and the political situation there at the moment, but it's an active war zone. and we were finding it incredibly difficult to do these rescues. One of the ways that we found that we could get the girls out was to walk them through the night. We'd hide during the day. These two young girls were the two first girls that we rescued. It took us 38 days to get them home, walking through the night and hiding through the day. There were so many of these victims that we ended up, one of our donors donated a private plane for us to be able to get 2 plane loads of women home. But of course, when we're trying to rescue people from an active war zone, getting them to the airport, hiding them after they've been rescued and finding hiding places for them, and then getting them to the airport at the one day to be able to get them home became incredibly difficult. That situation changed even more when we saw the uptake of forced criminality. And we know now that across Southeast Asia, there are online scam compounds where people are being trafficked and forced to do online telephone and email scams. We know this isn't just impacting people in Southeast Asia. In Australia, sorry, we know that there's 1.3 million lost every single day to people by online scams. In the US, they're saying 12.5 billion, sorry, just last year alone. And in Vietnam, it's estimated that 70% of the population have been targeted in cyber scams. And these people are being trafficked. Some of them are being offered jobs that they think are legitimate jobs. Some of them are even going through the employment process, job application processes, interviews, to find themselves being trapped into these scam compounds where they're being held under armed guard. We know that at last count, there's a minimum of 220,000 victims from 40 countries who are currently being held just in Myanmar and Cambodia alone. The situation is incredible. And it's becoming even more and more, more dangerous and violent across time. We're finding now that we're not just rescuing people, although it started in Cambodia, we are now rescuing people from across the region. And you can see those different areas that we've been rescuing people from over the last 12 months. We do have and I'll pop the link in the chat at the end, but we do have a report that was just released yesterday where you can get more information about this and to find out more about what's happening and the trends that we're seeing, in addition to the solutions that we can see and the hope that we think that we can provide. We first became aware of the trafficking of young people into Cambodia for these online scam compounds when one of the boys who had been part of our Street Kids program, Tien, when he was trafficked to Cambodia, and he was only 14 years old when he was trafficked in 2022. We are getting calls from help every single day. Some mornings, our rescue teams and our legal teams are waking up to 7 messages in the morning of people asking to be rescued, people crying out for help. The situation is incredibly desperate and dangerous. We know that people who are being forced to do online scams who are not meeting their targets are being abused and being tortured for not doing the work. And that is growing in terms of the locations, as I mentioned before. In 2022, we were primarily doing those rescues from Cambodia, and we'd seen that there were a few rescues needed in Thailand as well. But from 2023, we're seeing it from across the Southeast Asian region. If you'd asked us even a couple of years ago about the trafficking of people for organ removal, we would have said that it was something that we thought was a little bit of a myth, that we hadn't actually come across it, and that it probably wasn't as common as people think it is. We're starting now to see, though, that people who are being trapped into these online scam compounds are being forced to have organs removed. Sorry, if they're refusing to meet their targets, or if they're refusing to scam and to do these online scams. So one of the boys that we rescued, who was a young man, 30-year-old, he'd been strapped into the scam center for 6 months in Myanmar. And he'd been refusing to work. He actually wasn't very good at the job. He had very little education and he wasn't very good at doing it. He wasn't meeting his targets and he didn't want to be doing it. And so as punishment, the traffickers attempted to remove his kidney, but they've changed their mind halfway through. He didn't end up having that kidney removed, but when he returned, when we were able to rescue him, he has an incredible scar through his abdominal region where we can see that it was attempted. We're also hearing from people that other people are being taken to have organs removed and are just not coming back. So we've rescued 5 people so far who we know of who have had organs removed through this process of punishment for not meeting their targets. So I know it sounds really desperate, and it is, where we've done 7 times the number of rescues this year alone already compared to what we had anticipated we would do this entire year. The situation is incredibly dire. But at the same time, we do have cause for hope. We started looking a couple of years ago now at what would it take to end human trafficking in Vietnam and what have we done in the past that's worked and what do we know? What do we know that's worked? What do we know that we can use to be able to move forward? And so we've developed some strategies that we're implementing through communities across Vietnam. And it looks different in every different place. When we have people in the countryside, obviously what's needed to be able to keep them safe from trafficking is slightly different to what's needed in the cities. What we're doing is developing anti-trafficking boards. And those anti-trafficking boards are particular to the community in which they're developed. They're made up of local people, government officials, teachers, police, social workers, local elders and experts in the community. And those people are being trained to deliver anti-trafficking programs, workshops. In the city, for example, in Hanoi, this was an anti-trafficking workshop that we ran with a group of what we call xe om drivers. If you've been to Vietnam and caught one of their motorbike taxis, they're called xe oms, which is basically like motorbike hugs, is how they're worded. But these motorcycle taxi drivers, these Grab drivers, Uber riders, they had unknowingly become human traffickers. People who worked or were traffickers into those, the construction of the photo that I showed you earlier, were going to the bus stations where these xe om drivers were working. And they were saying to them that, hey, I've got this big construction project and I need people to work at it. If you find me somebody, if somebody comes and they're looking for a job, bring them to me. I'll give you money. I'll give you a finder's fee for finding them and I'll be able to give them a job. And so these motorbike taxi drivers were taking young people to these work sites, not knowing that they were actually unwittingly becoming traffickers themselves. Those xe om drivers are now anti-human trafficking crusaders in their communities. They know now what to look out for, they know what the dangers are, and they know to look out for people who are coming and who are offering jobs like that to be able to reach out to Blue Dragon and the police so that we can do something about it. So that's what it's looking like in the city. In the countryside, it's the same sort of thing. It's having local members, local community people be able to run anti-trafficking workshops in community to help people understand what a human trafficking trick might look like, how they can keep themselves safe. And not only do these workshops help people understand what trafficking looks like, it also helps the community to be involved in canvassing their own community to understand who is vulnerable to being trafficked in the first place. So this young mum, for example, she had 4 children. She was already living in absolute poverty when her husband passed away. She was home with the babies. And he had been the one who had been trying to earn an income for them. And suddenly she was left with 4 children and no way to be able to feed them or care for them. She decided that the best thing that she could do for her children was to leave them, that she was going to leave them in her community with other people to care for them so that she could find a job to be able to get an income to care for her children. What she found, though, when she went to the anti-trafficking workshop with the anti-trafficking board, was that the text messages through Zalo, through a messaging app that she'd been receiving about this job, were exactly the same, almost word for the messages that were being given to people when they were being trafficked into Cambodia, into these scam compounds. We know that if she'd left, she probably would never have seen those children again. But now her community knows that she needs support, and we know she exists, and we know that she needs support. We were able to give her emergency money to be able to get through the next immediate period of time, to do whatever she needed to do to be able to have the income to care for her family. And simultaneously, we also bought her a very pregnant cow. We were able to supply 12 months worth of veterinary fees and taught her how to care for that cow. And she now has a sustainable income that's able to be able to keep her being able to live in her community with her children, safe from human trafficking. We've done the same thing for 15 other families in her community. And we're also paying school fees for 15 other families and groups of children in the community as well. So this cluster of activities, being able to do raising awareness, running educational workshops, canvassing the community to know who's vulnerable, helping out with livelihood support so that people have a sustainable income and they're less vulnerable, paying for school fees to keep kids in school. All of those different elements are coming together to keep people safe from human trafficking. And we know that if we were only doing one of those elements alone, it wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't be effective in ending human trafficking. The other really interesting thing that we found when we started doing the research to put these initiatives together was that when we look at, we knew what the profile of a victim of human trafficking was, but we hadn't looked deeply into the profile of the traffickers. And so that became the next step. And when we looked into the profile of the traffickers, what we found is that in Vietnam, the profile is very similar to a victim of human trafficking. The traffickers themselves tend to come from very low socioeconomic communities. They tend to have low education, low literacy, and they're looking for a way to improve their own lives. By running these anti-trafficking workshops in community, run by community members, not only are they sustainable because they're from people within that village, within the commune, we're also helping those people who may be tempted to look to human trafficking as an income source to understand the impact on the community, the impact on the victims, and also the impact on themselves and their own family when it comes to jail sentences and the fines that their families are forced to pay. And so we're finding that that's been really successful. And we've put those in 2 different areas, in Ha Giang and Dien Bien in northern Vietnam. And we've been really excited because the local governments are coming on board. They're now asking us to implement these programs in additional areas, and they're offering to help with the funding of it where they can as well. So we've been pretty excited in being able to see that these initiatives work. It takes time, it takes money, it takes government buy-in, but when we're able to make them happen, they work, and we're really excited we'll be implementing them in 3 new areas, 3 new states or communes around Vietnam this year. And our goal is within the next decade to have these anti-trafficking programs right around Vietnam, helping people become less vulnerable to human trafficking. I think I've spoken a lot and given you a lot of information already, so I might stop there and just see if you have any questions or anything that you'd like to ask. If there's anything that you want more information about.
I'd love to ask a question, Kim. Thanks. I unfortunately came in late. I was on a call a little earlier, but fascinating stuff, the stuff I did here. As you may have heard, but we're looking at building, some economic development programs, but very much to this grassroots idea, the idea of having a cow and making some money. I mean, because when I'm looking at these people, and I'm so grateful that you have kind of been in those circles and talked to these people. That's the stuff I'm looking for. It's like, what are the things that in the mountains of, Taiwan or Thailand or whatever, Cambodia, Myanmar, that that these people who are vulnerable to go into something like this, one is an education component to make sure they recognize it, like the drivers, the taxi drivers you mentioned. The other is, how do we get them something that gives them the economic alternative to create sustainable, life, right? And if it's a pregnant cow, let's do it, right? But my background, and this is, I've done this in 10 countries and 4 languages, is helping start entrepreneurs, right? But some of them are just starting a salsa company or a sewing company or whatever. Like, we're not talking about venture development and things like that. We're talking, get them a cow, get them some seeds, get them some stuff, and how do we do this? And so I'm very eager to try to figure out what these people really need, and how do we, is there a way to, I don't want to say systemize this, but find the opportunities, find a couple of tools like a cow, and find a little, and provide a little bit of an education around how to make that a sustainable thing. So, if you, that's kind of more of a statement than a question, but how have you found these types of things that they'd be looking for that would actually work for them, to in their village with a single mom with 4 kids? What can they do that would actually be a viable solution for them to actually maintain?
Yeah, I think the secret is that we have local staff working with local people in their community. I know you're seeing a white face on the computer screen tonight, but we have about 130 staff at Blue Dragon. Only 5 of us are foreigners. The rest of our staff, our lawyers, psychologists, social workers, are all Vietnamese. And so when we're working in Ha Giang or Dien Bien, for example, we're talking a lot to people from ethnic minority communities. And so they may not even speak the majority Vietnamese King language. They're speaking in their own dialect. And so we have local staff who are speaking in the same language and the same dialect, who understand what it is to live in that community and what it means to be part of that community. And if we were trying to do this as a top-down approach, it just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And that's why we know that in every community that we go to, it will look slightly different. What's needed in the Mekong Delta down in southern Vietnam is very different to what's needed in the mountains in northern Vietnam. So it's really working with local people to understand what it is they need. I think the other secret that's working really nicely is that it's not just about lifting individuals out of poverty, but it's about lifting communities. So we have the way that the cow banks work, or the pig banks or the chicken banks, whatever it is we're working with for individuals, is that once they have that sustainable income and they're okay, their next live animal goes to somebody else in their community who is vulnerable. And so it's that being able to help lift more than just those 15 people in that particular community out of poverty. It's helping the community to be able to gel together, to be able to sustain themselves as well. And I think that's been another really important part of the process.
Love it. Thank you.
Thanks, Don.
I have a
I have a
question.
question.
I love this.
I love this.
This is Erin, and I live in Quebec, which is French speaking. And it's my understanding that actually that's the lasting colonial language in Vietnam. And I was looking online to see what was available in French. I have a good friend from Vietnam here. Do you have the information in French? And do you find French at all good for your organization, or what other languages besides of course, Vietnamese and the local dialects?
Yeah, we're seeing less French now than we used to. It's definitely a generational thing. I think as the younger generations are coming through, there is more and more English, and there's more emphasis on English coming through. But our resources and the delivery of our programs is all in Vietnamese. So yeah, we're not actually we're using local dialects in Vietnamese. So none of our English speakers are delivering these sort of workshops. I'm delivering these workshops, but I'm delivering them in a very modified way to school students around the world, English speaking school students. And we're kind of modifying them in a way that helps school students understand the issues and how we're going about ending human trafficking. But in terms of delivering it to people in Vietnam where it's all happening in Vietnamese or in one of the ethnic minority dialects.
Well, in fact, I looked at your webpage and I didn't see a way to switch languages. Do you have it in Vietnamese, your webpage?
We have parts of our webpage in
Okay.
Vietnamese. So one of the tricky things about being an international NGO working in Vietnam is that we are not allowed to fundraise within Vietnam. And so we have to be very careful about the what we have in terms of on the web pages. So it's not, we're not seen to be soliciting fundraising within the country. So, but yeah, we do have
Thank
a
you.
lot of our Facebook is often in bilingual, but it is, yeah, and I guess a lot of the communities that we're working with within those regions in particular aren't necessarily literate in the Vietnamese King language anyway. So yeah, we would have to have it in more than 70 languages to be able to, and a lot of those languages are not written necessarily languages.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Kim. Simon, I've got a question. I'm from the UK, and I'm sorry, it's a question about statistics, but I noticed your 70%, you said that 70% of Vietnamese people were targeted. Does that mean they were targeted in the scams or targeted as scam players, if you like?
No, targeted in the scams.
Oh, I see. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. We're not sure. Yeah.
Victims of the scam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've rescued just over 1,500 victims of human trafficking so far, and that number is expected to grow exponentially this year. We don't have statistics for how many people are being trafficked. We can give you our best estimate, but in terms of, we know how many we're rescuing, and we know what we're being told by the people who we're rescuing as to what it's looking like where they've been trafficked. But yeah, it's really, as you would know, really difficult to give accurate numbers about how many people are actually being trafficked.
I don't know whether you know, in the UK, we have something called the NRM, which actually records the number of people found, well, referred into the NRM, which is nearly equivalent to those found in modern slavery. But do you have anything like equivalent figures in Vietnam?
Yeah, we do. I couldn't give them to you off the top of my head, but that report that we can put the link to in the chat,
yeah.
That report definitely has them. But yeah, I don't know them off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
No. Thank you.
Probably something I should know, but.
Hey, Kim, this is Karen. Thank you for this presentation. It was really enlightening in a both positive and frightening way, but I'm really impressed with what you're doing with communities, and I love the philosophy of lifting a whole community out of poverty and providing those alternatives, just not individuals, because like you, our mission, our vision is to end human trafficking around the world, globally. And that's even bigger audacious goal than what you have in Vietnam. But I think what you reminded me of today was that doing this is possible, and it's one community, but it's one community at a time. And I think that actually we were thinking one person at a time. So you've actually given me some encouragement to say, let's look at it from a little bit more holistically, and maybe it's a little bit more possible. So thank you. I would encourage you to look up Matt Friedman, the gentleman who, because he has actually been working with a scam, and he has a history with working with the U.S. State Department, and so he has a great resume. And he and I had a chat a few weeks ago, and he said that he has never been as busy as he's been in this, working with ending human trafficking in his job, identifying and rescuing for 35 years. And he said he's never been as busy as working with scam artists. So I would encourage you, again, we're going to do this together by coordinating and, working with him to say, look, this is what we're doing in Vietnam, and either, leverage each other's. So
Absolutely,
Michelle,
yeah. I'm a frequent stalker of Matt's LinkedIn page.
Oh, all right, you are. Okay,
Yeah.
you already know of him. So
yeah,
great. That's good.
But it is, we are finding the same thing. Like we have never seen the situation as violent or as desperate as it is
Yeah.
right now. We in some ways can't imagine that it could be worse. It has to get better because it can't get worse than this. And I think in some ways, you know, I'm talking about what's happening to people in Vietnam who are being trafficked, but this is a global problem. You know,
Yeah.
we need banks, we need governments, we need IT specialists. This is
Yeah.
not something that Blue Dragon is going to solve by supporting people in Vietnam. We can be rescuing people, we can be preventing people in Vietnam from being trafficked, but it needs that people power to be pushing governments to create change and to globally do something about it. And unfortunately, I think that this time there are people around the world who are being impacted. Governments can no longer look internally, inwardly, and say, well, it's not happening. We don't have scam factories happening here in Australia, so we're okay. People in Australia are being impacted by these scams. And so I think maybe that will be what turns the tide somewhat into help people look a little bit outward. And I wish it didn't take that, but I think maybe it might.
If I can click on mute fast enough to beat 17,000 other questions that might be coming at you. It's really, okay, so as a guy sitting here in Canada, I am absolutely, and I have 6 businesses and I have 6 different email accounts and WhatsApp all over around the world. I have companies reaching out to me and talking to me. I get so much friggin' spam. It's not funny, right?
Yeah.
And I've understood that some of that is coming from people that are in human trafficking. Is there a way that we can either geolocate and or like help? Like I'm on my Reddit channel, there's a scam bait kind of talk where people are communicating and actually having conversations with people on chat and they posting it. And most of the time it's just like identifying them as a scammer and, calling them out. But recognizing now that the victimness of it all, is there a way that we could actually engage in a conversation and help potentially identify and or get them to safety from being the receiver of such spam?
Yeah. I think it's really, really incredibly difficult because for these people to be giving you information to admit that they have been trafficked or that they are victims of slavery puts them in an incredibly dangerous position.
True.
Our chief rescue guy sleeps on his back next to his wife with his phone on his chest on vibrate, so that if a message comes through in the middle of the night, it won't wake his wife.
Right.
He is available 24/7. And as I said, getting up to 7 calls for help a night. And it's really so opportunistic for people to be able to ask for help and to call for help. We actually had a webinar just last night, actually, with people more knowledgeable than me from Blue Dragon. I can give you the link for that too. But one of the things they talked about is reporting things to the police, like actually reporting it, not just saying, oh yeah, I've been scammed again and letting it go, but reporting it so that it is on file and that people, if they do start to do something about it, they can look into it. And reaching out to organizations. If somebody does tell you that they've been trafficked and they're Vietnamese, it's like doing a Google search, like, hey, who's the organization in Vietnam who can help, and reaching out to Blue Dragon or whoever it is within the country that they're talking to. But I think for somebody to admit that they've been trafficked and being forced to do this would be fairly minimal and risky.
I understand that. I'm just trying to, I'm just,
Yeah.
a way for us to globalize the problem or
Yeah.
potential solutions. I mean, that's
too.
we're all feeling it. We just don't necessarily recognize it. We feel it from the pinch and the pain of getting friggin' bandwidth absorbed through, bad, stupid emails or texts or whatever. But what's really happening is what's going on behind it, and how do we get to the root of it, right?
Yeah. And I think that's why it's so important that we're actually addressing the root cause of why people are becoming vulnerable to being trafficked in the first place. If we can be ending it by helping lift communities out of poverty to start with, then they're less vulnerable, they're less likely to become a victim to this in the first place. So it really has to be that whole stream approach where we're looking at doing the rescues, getting people home, helping them to be able to regain their lives again, but also helping them not to be trafficked in the first place. We really have to be doing all of it for it to be successful. And I think that's the bit that for most of us is the easiest part to be a part of the solution, right? Is to be helping lift people out of poverty to begin with.
Yeah, my little corner of the world on this is, democratize entrepreneurship. And I don't mean, like I said, I'm not talking about, going and raising capital and starting a software business. I'm talking about 10,000 years ago, we used to know how to start a small business and provide for ourselves. And now we don't. Right. And so how do we actually get into an economy or a local community and actually teach them really, really simple fundamentals of finding a customer and selling something, right? Finding a need and filling it. Right. And if you can do that on a community level, both with the people that are rescued, but also get in front of it and actually give some economic alternatives to, oh my goodness, how do I do this? This is what I want to do. Right. This is where I'm kind of excited about it. So.
Yeah, love it.
So I appreciate your help. Thanks so much on this. Really, I'll reach out and say hi on an email or something too, but thank you.
Thank you. I love that.